Thank you everyone for joining in. This is our second webinar of the series, Undergraduate Applications Demystified. The idea with the first webinar was to give you an idea in terms of what the admissions rubric was, what undergraduate admissions committees are looking for, etc. The idea with this particular webinar is for us to do a couple of different things. One, to identify how you should be building your own profile, how you can stand out from others when you're submitting your applications to undergraduate admissions. And then subsequently to look at a couple of different journeys. One of them is our guest speaker today, Divyansh. Divyansh is someone who's gone through the entire process like you guys a couple of years ago. He's currently a rising junior at the University of California, Berkeley, where he majors in economics and operations research. And we'll talk to him about what his journey in high school was, how he went about the entire application process, and then I'll leave the floor open for your questions as well. Even before I get started, I just wanted to run you through a couple of different slides in a presentation where I outline the different sort of steps you should be sort of ideally taking in terms of how you can stand out from the rest of the applicants. This slide deck shouldn't take more than about 15 minutes, and then we'll get into the questionnaire with Divyansh. So again, thank you so much for joining in. I hope you can take out as much from this session. Again, for people who are joining us for the first time, the first webinar was about the admissions rubric and what universities are exactly looking for from your application. All of these meetings are being recorded, and the recordings will be on our social media for you to go back and see. Another important thing we've had from previous sessions is a lot of follow-up questions. If at any point in time you want to talk to us about your specific profile and how you should structure the entire application process, please feel free to go on to gradvine.com and schedule your free consultation call. One of our counselors or myself will get in touch with you, go through step by step in terms of what's required, where are you at right now, and how we can help you out. So without further ado, let's go on to the presentation, and then we'll get a chance to talk to Divyansh after that. All right, so today's topic, like I said, is going to be how do you stand out? How do you build a epic profile for you to get into undergrad admissions, focused on US universities, but in general could be open to any university abroad. These are tips and tricks that you can take to use to create the perfect profile when it comes to admissions abroad, when it comes to universities that have a holistic application process. For notes or detailed structures on what the holistic admissions process is, we covered that in the previous webinar. I will put out the link and send that out to you guys in an email after this is done, so you can go ahead and look at that. So today's speaker, of course, just to reintroduce myself for those of you who do not know, I am one of the founders of Gradvine. Gradvine is essentially a peer-to-peer mentorship firm which has helped over 1,000 students, both undergrad and graduate students, to get into their dream universities. I myself have a master's degree from Carnegie Mellon, worked with the governor in the state of California for a couple of years before I moved back to take over full-time here at Gradvine. So I've had the experience of not just putting myself through university, but also had the experience of sitting on the other side where I was a admissions checker or on the committee, on the student admissions committee for graduate programs and undergraduate programs at CMU. And Gradvine itself is a platform of 500 plus mentors, every single one of them who's gone through the entire journey themselves, either graduate or undergraduate. And these are guys that come from experience and are experienced enough to talk to you about your particular major, how to crack the undergraduate admissions, also what you should be showcasing or how you should be building your own profile. I'm also joined today by Divyansh. Again, he's a student who's currently at the University of California, Berkeley, a top 5 when it comes to econ and operations research. He's currently a rising junior and spends a lot of time doing a lot of entrepreneurship sort of classes, teaches one class as well, and is academically involved in the research fields of financial behavioral economics. So that's a little bit about the speakers for today. So what am I going to cover in today's session? I'm essentially going to be covering a bunch of different things, right? One is the idea of what a good profile itself is. How do I or admissions committees define what a good profile is? Then tell you tips and tricks which are enlisted as below. We'll go through each one of these in a little bit. Let's get started with what all does a good profile consist of. One of the most important things that we covered even in the last section was this fact that universities are not looking for someone who's a jack of all, master of none. Universities and colleges are looking to build a class that is outside of the grades and test scores, etc. They're absolutely looking for students who can positively contribute to the campus community. They're also evaluating whether you have the pedigree, whether you have the skill set to actually go through such a rigorous curriculum and be able to graduate at the end of 4 years. A very, very big and a popular myth that a lot of parents as well as students still believe is that colleges want to admit well-rounded students. That's absolutely not the reality. The reality is that the colleges and universities want to build up well-rounded classes and therefore will take in specialists for each of those sort of things that fit in to both the class as well as the overall college and university community. Colleges essentially want to be seeing students pursuing the things that they are absolutely passionate about, that they have made a difference over the last course of their high school and are outside of activities like coursework and test prep or test scores. These could be outside reading, community service, internships, projects that you've done, classwork itself that you've contributed, or a thesis, or any of that kind of stuff. They essentially want to build a classroom full of specialists as compared to generalists, but keep in mind that they're looking at your overall profile as well. They care absolutely about the grades and the test scores, but they care about a lot more than that as well. So one of the things that I'm going to concentrate today on is something called defined interest, showing them interest through activities, through coursework, through you could be competitions, through reading, through theses, anything of that sort, right? So if, for example, let's say you're someone who's interested in engineering, you should have demonstrated interest in terms of taking rigorous math and science courses in high school, perform well on the SAT subject tests, the SAT general test, the SAT subject tests in math, science, whatever. Participate maybe in national or international sort of science fairs, Olympiads, robotics competitions, anything of that sort. And then show dedication towards whatever activity you're picking. Even if it is one single activity that you're picking, show how the progression in that particular activity has been, right? So those are the couple of things that I wanted to convey. Instead of, well-rounded students, which they are absolutely looking for, but universities go a step above that and look for specialists, well-rounded specialists, if that's a term I can coin, that have different specialities, different interests, but come together, fit together as one particular class and can contribute to the overall campus community. The importance of having conversations. One of the most important things that I can tell you for building your profile, if you're a student in 9th, 10th, and 11th grades, is to have conversations. When you have one-on-one conversations with people who've walked different streams in life, who've walked different paths, careers, etc., you get an idea of what they do on a day-to-day basis. You get an idea in terms of how their own journeys were. You get an idea in terms of what they liked in high school, how they made their path, what they're currently doing, and how that is leading or has already led to a particular career in a particular stream as such. You can gain a lot of inspiration, and that's something that is absolutely critical for us to be able to figure out what sort of major minor combination to take, what sort of career paths exist, what are opportunities for me to do either academic or non-academic research, etc. All of these are things that you absolutely need inspiration for, and that's how you can get that. By talking to people is how you can get that inspiration. We believe in this central concept of high school kids and college students reaching out to as many people as possible, conversing with them, asking them questions, etc. Because when you ask them questions, you yourself get a much more clarity in terms of what you want to be pursuing. And that gets me to essentially the next sort of thing that you can do for building a particular sort of a profile. A lot of you that are in ninth and 10th grades and maybe even 11th grades come up to me and say, hey, I'm interested in doing this particular major, but I don't know what sort of projects or internships or leadership positions I should be taking. Can you help me out? Absolutely. And this goes back to how at Gradvine we believe that the core of everything that you do has to be rooted in the fact that that is something that you're passionate about, that is something that you're interested in, and that is something that you want to pursue, maybe as maybe not as a career, but as something that you are curious about, something that you want to go delve deeper apart from what is being taught in the class or what is stuff that you are learning from peers around you. Go that extra level. And in order to show that you've gone the extra level, projects, internships, and leadership positions at schools, any company outside, within your own organization, club, etc., are standout features. Universities are specifically looking for ways in which you've set yourself apart, and projects, internships, etc., are a great way to show that. So, the follow-up question from a lot of you is going to be, how do I figure out what projects, where do I go, who do I talk to, etc. So far, LinkedIn, just emailing people, your own extended networks, these are three things that we've personally found to be great places for you to be able to go make that connection, for you to be able to sort of figure out what sort of projects people are working on, etc. The other avenue, which is what we are building at Gradvine for both conversations as well as projects, is the fact that we've cultivated this huge mentor network, upwards of 500. So if you wanted to have a conversation with someone who's a lawyer, absolutely something that we can do. Econ, psychology, liberal arts, engineering, anything of that sort, right? Any sort of an interest that you have or even vaguely know that is something that I might sort of want to take a look at, want to explore more, we've cultivated the mentor network for you to tap into and get in touch to have conversations one-on-one. That's what we've done. Once you have about 8 to 10 conversations with people from different walks of life, what we've observed is that you get further clarity in terms of what you want to be choosing, either as your major or your minor or as a career as well. And that's when the projects component of it comes in. At Gradvine, you will be working on projects under the guidance of mentors that are specialists in that field. So you gain two things specifically. One, you gain an idea about what that field itself is. You gain an idea about what specific things go into making that one project itself. Is that the right thing for me or not? And two, that is something that you can use to build your own profile to stand out from the rest of the people. You get an idea in terms of how that one particular project has given you certain intricate knowledge, certain specialized knowledge and skill that has helped you step away from competition and establish yourself in a league of your own. So these are things, projects, leadership, internships, etc. These are things that I would absolutely recommend that you do either in the summer between your 9th and 10th grades or the summer between 10th and 11th grades. So the next session, we're going to be talking about the timeline and what all is required for admissions and so on and so forth. But this session, I want to be essentially showing you tidbits of where you can fit in all of these projects and internships. Leadership is something that you can take up throughout your high school, and that is something that is recommended. Explore in your first year of high school, that's 9th grade, explore all of the clubs that they are, figure out where you fit in, figure out what interests you have, and slowly build a path towards leadership positions within that particular club or organization that you've taken up. All right. The next biggest thing you can do to distinguish yourself, set yourself apart during the application phase is demonstrating interest. If you want to be taken seriously by the admissions committee, you've got to show them some love. You've got to go ahead and tell them, hey, I am someone who's not filling the forms just for the sake of filling the forms. I am not another applicant at your university. I am someone who comes in with specific knowledge about the university, about your programs, about the faculty and the professors that are teaching particular classes within the programs, and specific knowledge about my peer group, about the alumni network, etc. So demonstrating interest within a particular university is absolutely critical when it comes to application process. I'll give you the backstory in just a little bit. So, universities today are very, very concerned about this metric called yield rates, yield, which is essentially how many students am I giving out the offers to, the admissions offers to, and how many of those are actually taking that up and coming to my university. Demonstrating a higher level of interest shows that if given an admit, you're more likely than the others to take up that admit. In an era where yield rates are on the downturn, where yield rates are falling down, universities absolutely care about yield rates at this point in time. They want a lot more students out of the ones that they've given out admit letters to come back to that university, right? And therefore, if you want to be taken seriously, demonstrate a little bit of interest during the application process so that the admissions committee knows and can recall that, hey, this is the guy that sent us an email, or this is the guy who sort of came on to our virtual campus tour, or actually visited the campus, took time to ask me interesting questions, etc. All of that is something that goes behind name recognition. And that is something that university admissions care about when they're looking at giving admits itself. Is this a student that is going to come and join me if given an admit? If yes, your chances of admission, your chances of being given an admit increase. The other thing that I'm going to touch about is essentially connect and be in constant contact with universities that you have a high interest in. Establish your connections to the school, making sure that you write emails to them, ask pertinent questions about the application process. If you have any doubts, etc., go ahead and make sure you shoot them an email. Be very polite in those emails, etc. And then once you've established the connection, make sure that during the application process that you tailor the essays absolutely very, very critically to whichever major minor combination and university you're applying to. Tailoring the essays goes a long way in showing a higher interest in terms of making it to that university. Frankly, colleges understand that they're getting applications from thousands, if not a lot more, of high school students every single year, which means that a lot of you are going to have similar experiences. Specifically in the case of Indian students, right? A lot of you will have higher grades, higher SAT scores. A lot of you would be part of your debate clubs, your MUNs. A lot of you would have played sport at some level in high school, etc. So it's critical that we do certain things right and then make sure that it really doesn't matter what those experiences are. It's just the length, the breadth of these experiences, and how much depth you've gone in exploring those particular things that will help you stand out. Therefore, it brings me to one of the most important things, which is to be authentic to yourself. Standing out does not mean you portray an image that the admissions that you have in your head that the admissions committee wants to look at. No. Portraying yourself as yourself, but the best version of yourself is what you should be targeting. And that comes from demonstrated interest. That comes from writing really well-tailored essays. That comes from getting in touch with college counselors, getting in touch with admissions committees, emailing them, establishing connections, etc. All of these are small little things that you can do to substantially stand out from the rest. Don't have to frankly climb Mount Everest or Kilimanjaro or whatever. Don't have to do something that is extraordinary. Of course, those things help, but as an average student, as someone who gets average grades, average SAT scores, as someone who's taken a deep interest in a particular thing, etc., the way you can stand out is by showing demonstrated interest in a particular major, minor, and university combination. The next thing, and frankly, where Indian students lose out, is the fact that they're not thinking about applications early. Students come to me towards the end of 11th grade and say, hey, I want to go abroad for undergraduate studies. It's very, very difficult at that time. The ideal time that you should be thinking about foreign applications or going undergrad abroad is 9th or 10th grades. when you have the time and the time, the energy, and the opportunity, frankly, to build your own profiles, to get close to a really good profile, and make sure that you stand out from the rest of the thousands of applicants that are sort of applying to universities. So there isn't anything as to as how early should I be starting. Ninth, 10th is a great time to be starting, and that's what I would recommend that you guys do. Again, if you want to talk to us about your specific case, of course, feel free to schedule a conversation with us on www.gradvine.com. It's a free consultation call. Let's get on a call. Let's chat about your specific grades, your plan, your timeline, etc. But I'm also going to be covering the generic timeline in the next webinar, which will correspond with you over email. So just to sort of wrap this session up, how do I stand out from the rest? Colleges look at everything from all 4 years of undergrad, and therefore begin early. It is never too early to start preparing for the college admissions process. I know a lot of people will keep harping this into your ears, including your school counselors, everyone that you meet in your peer group, etc. Keep your grades up. Keep your test scores high. These two factors are hard factors that we talked about in the webinar last time, and these two factors go a long, long way in getting you in. One of the biggest, another mistake that a lot of you students seem to be making is that you're misrepresenting yourself. You're misrepresenting yourself in order to appear to be someone that you think the admissions committee is more likely to take in. There is no perception of what the perfect high school student to get into a college needs to be. That perception does not exist. Put forward the best version of yourself, applications that are well tailored to that particular university, to that particular major, minor combination, etc. And that's your way into getting into a dream university for yourself. Reiterating another point, colleges don't want well-rounded students themselves. They want well-rounded classes. They want specialists who all fit together, come together, and contribute to the campus community. And this is something that a lot of students and parents equally fail to completely understand. The other thing, and this is sort of intuitive, and this is something that a lot of students need to get right. Colleges want you to want them. Colleges want you to show that demonstrated interest, go one step ahead than all the other regular applicants. And this is how colleges gauge your interest in whether you will join them or not if given the admit. Again, go back to the yield rates that I was talking about. So tailoring your essays, providing specific examples of what you like about the particular university you're applying to, how you see yourself fitting in to that particular university and the class, and then also standing out as an applicant group will absolutely increase the chances of your admissions. How do we at Gradvine help? Again, like I said, we do two services essentially. Profile building, which is for students in their 9th, 10th, and 11th, where we will make sure that you have one-on-one conversations with mentors who are at the most prestigious universities you could imagine. Having one-on-one conversations, again, you figure out what they did right, how you can do, what you can do right now to build your profiles, etc. Do a project with us, prepare personalized timelines, etc. And then, of course, the application assistance itself, which is university shortlisting, making sure that we tailor essays, resumes, all of the application material that is required for that particular university, and then making sure that you're on track to getting into your university as such. That's pretty much it in terms of the presentation for today. What I'm going to move to next is I'm going to be talking to Divyansh about his own sort of experience navigating through the entire high school sort of arena. If you guys have any specific questions for me, please feel free to put that in the comment box, on the chat box, and I'll keep asking those questions as well. First of all, Divyansh, thank you so much for joining in. So when I first thought of who I should be bringing onto the platform, I immediately sort of went back into my mentor portfolio, looked at people that are doing really well, people that I had connections with, and etc., and brought the Vyansh on. So the first question essentially is, how was your high school experience like? What did you do? How did you make sure that you stood out?
So first of all, I think it's really great that you're doing this, and I'm really happy to be here. I wish I had access to something like this while I was applying, because I'm sure just talking to current students would help a lot. So in terms of my high school journey, I think what I really focused on and what I dug deep into was my interest in public speaking. Whether this was MUNs, whether this was other conferences, in terms of debates, elocution, things like that. So I think a big hook for me was public speaking, and the fact that I was applying for economics and political science really fit right in with the fact that I was doing MUNs. I was doing a lot of this public advocacy. I did this one international conference in South Africa, and that really tied well with my international relations angle. So I think just a couple of other things I did for, a little background was, I was the head boy of my school. So that shows colleges that, I'm into leadership and I have the ability to lead a team. I did MUNs for about, I think 6 years or 5 years, and that really allowed me to dig deep. And I definitely wrote a couple of essays about it. I also organized my own MUN. So that shows leadership to colleges and shows the fact that I'm really interested in international relations. Another thing I did was I played national level basketball in India. So, it's definitely not comparable to the level of sports in the US or, anywhere else. But it showed that, this is something that I'm interested in, and I'm not just someone who is interested in academics. So that sort of rounded me out and showed colleges that, I could fit in with a class that has sporting interests as well. Just as you talked about how, universities look for a rounded class and not necessarily a rounded individual. Another thing that I was able to write a lot of essays on, and something that I felt strongly about, was I did a large sex education event in my school. And I tried to make that an annual thing. And with this, sex education event, I did like a social awareness week in school, and I was able to just reach a lot of people, make a lot of great connects, and just put the message out there that, awareness is key and being an ally is super important. So these are just a couple of things that I did in school, and I think that worked for me in, building a profile that stood out.
That's great. So one of the things that I wanted to sort of take away from that bit in terms of what he's done right is the fact that it wasn't someone who's done journalism, debating, XYZ. It wasn't all over the place. It's something that was very focused towards. So figuring out what major you wanted to do was probably one of the first things that you got right. Then you make sure that everything that you do from that point on, all of the out of class activities are very tailored towards that particular major, figuring out what clubs are essentially tied in or will get you or have the hook, like you said, towards that particular major, etc. That I think is absolutely critical. So for everyone that's sort of trying to figure out what majors to take, how would you suggest they go about this if they were in their 9th and 10th grades, 9th, 10th, and even maybe 11th grades? How should they figure out what majors to pick in colleges? That's question number one. And if they've figured that out, how do they then get back in terms of the timeline and, sort of make sure to pick the right clubs, etc., to lead them towards that?
Right. So I think, speaking from experience, I think what you've been talking about and how like figuring out that you want to apply outside early is super important. I think I missed out on this because I decided to apply to the US and the UK in the beginning of 11th grade. So everything I had done up until then, it was just a happy accident that it, lined up perfectly with what I wanted to do. Right. So the fact that you, the fact that you talk about figuring things out early is super important. And once you're able to, gauge where your interests lie depending on what you've done, I think applying for a certain major becomes really easy, and you can just do things accordingly. But when it comes to picking majors in college, so I immediately, first semester of college, I went in, I stuck to economics because I took classes, but political science, I sort of lost it. And being in the Bay Area, you get this like you're in this tech bubble.
Yeah.
Right. So I immediately switched to data science, and then I took a couple of classes and realized that was not for me. So I think you're not set on the major that you pick, unless it's like a very specialized thing and you get into this like specific program. And I think college is a great place to just explore majors. But in terms of application, I think you still have somewhat of a sense of what you want to apply for.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a part of the question that I didn't answer?
Yeah. So I was just answering, once you sort of have a sense of what majors do you want to be applying to, how do you then look from where you are? You maybe you're probably in your 9th or 10th or maybe even 11th grades. And then you've picked a major, and then let's say, what sort of stuff do you want to be doing in order to push yourself towards the major? Let's maybe take examples. You can talk about econ, I can talk about engineering and stuff.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So, when I knew that I wanted to do econ, I knew there were like a couple of things I could do. I could either write, I could do some research, I could join like an economic organization that does empowerment and things like that. So I picked the last. So I was part of this economic empowerment project. This is entirely on my own, just something that I was interested in. And so I went ahead and did it. So I got a group of people together, figured out this is what we want to do and this is why we want to do it. And I just ran with it. I made time for it. Right. But I think something that I missed out on and that I would recommend to people is getting a taste of research early. Being able to write about things early is super important, because now looking back, I wish I had penned down my thoughts onto like a blog or something that obviously I could link in college applications, and this would demonstrate an over the top out of the ordinary interest in a particular academic field.
Absolutely. Yeah. So that brings me to a very important point. A lot of students that approach us are in their 9th and 10th grades. And in 10th grade, there's this critical sort of a diversion. What courses and subjects do you pick for your 11th grade? So essentially what I'm trying to say is getting back to the point of starting early. If you've sort of figured out that there are courses that are existing that you're interested in your 10th grade, the decision to pick courses in your 11th grade, the elective courses or your main courses, etc., that becomes that much more easier. Right. So one of our viewers is asking, what subjects did you particularly take up in high school, in maybe 9, 10, 11, 12, which sort of solidified or gave you a foundation for econ and OR?
So I did CBSE throughout. I was in the 9th and 10th grade, it was just regular CBSE that you have. And then in the 11th grade, I chose to do math, economics, business, accountancy, and English. I initially wanted to do math, physics, and econ, but the school didn't let me do that. So I just stuck to the regular commerce with math field. And I think that also showed colleges that, this is what I want to specialize in, because I feel like they still don't have the best grasp of the Indian education system, specifically CBSE. Yeah. Right. So I think the fact that we get to choose, and it's not very, I think really puts us at somewhat of an advantage. But then again, you can do a lot of other things. So I did. So this actually brings me to another point. So the fact that I wanted to major in political science as well. So I went one step forward and I did 2 AP courses.
Okay.
Is advanced placement. So I did 2 AP courses in, I think, the 11th grade. And I think that also sort of helped me stand out, because Indian students don't usually do AP courses. It's not part of our curriculum. It's something that you have to go above and beyond for.
Right. And that goes back to the point of showing demonstrated interest, where you know that there is a particular university which is a top 5 or a top 10 university for whichever major you're picking, and you know that in order to get there you have to stand off and you have to stand out of everyone else that is applying either from India or anywhere else. And one of the ways that you could do that is through AP courses, etc.
Yep.
That was what we were alluding to earlier in terms of internships, projects, leadership, or other curricular events that you can take up. All right, so a couple of more questions which are more in tune to what you're studying currently. So I know you're an economics and an operations research major. Can you tell us sort of at the most foundational level, what are courses that you've taken at Berkeley, at Cal, and what your career path seems to be driving towards?
Sure. So I'm a rising junior, but I was on a gap semester this semester, so I've technically only done 3 semesters. So in those 3 semesters, I've done a couple of econ courses, mainly focusing on macro. Okay. I've done math. What led me to OMS and econ, right, is so the structure of these two, of these 2 majors is fairly rigid, right? So although you do have like a lot of room to choose within the major, you have to decide fairly early on that you want to do this major. Right. So in the last 3 semesters at Berkeley, I've done math, stats, econ. I took a couple of electives in international relations, astronomy, a couple of breadths that you have to fulfill as part of like a college requirement. So that's like a broad overview of the type of classes I've taken. And in the next couple of semesters, I'm going to be sticking to econ, stats, and math courses mainly.
Okay.
In terms of like a career that, like a career goal that I'm sort of inching towards is I hope to get into the field of finance, right? Whether that's as a trading, like a sales and trading person, or whether that's investment banking. I'm not fully sure yet, but I'm fairly certain that this subject combination will help me get there.
Right. Okay. So, any questions you guys absolutely feel free to ask in the chat section. I want to go back and talk to you a little bit more about how to how to build your profile for an engineering or a STEM sort of a degree in undergrad. So a lot of students, one of the things that you have to keep in mind is that after 9th and 10th, a lot of you guys have the option to choose particular courses in your 11th grade. Our sort of standing instruction, this is a generic instruction, not for any specific case as such, is that choose courses that do not close down opportunities. For example, if you take PCM and if you are inclined towards any of the quantitative sort of fields, PCM makes a lot more sense than taking accountancy or anything of that sort. If you are more inclined towards getting into pre-med, etc., make sure that you have a bio in your 11th and 12th. So making sure that in your 11th grade, when you are making that decision, that you are as generalized as possible, opening up as many fields or keeping as many fields open as possible is one of the most critical things that you can do in 11th and 12th grades. Of course, if you are in 9th and 10th and you know absolutely that you have a particular major that you are 100% certain of going after, that's fine. Then you can sure close down opportunities. But if you are not really sort of sure about particular majors, then our recommendation would be to keep it as open as possible. In terms of how do you get into good STEM or engineering sort of courses, of course, do a lot of, do the general SAT, do the subject SATs as well, show demonstrated interest in terms of your grades, and advanced placement tests always help. So those are sort of points to keep in mind. There's another question. There's a student who's asking if you took the SAT and what was your score. Just give us a range of what the score was, and I will chime in terms of what big universities are looking at. Mm-hmm. So I'm pretty sure you had to take the SAT, right? Or if you took
I took the SAT, and I was able to take it only once because of the fact that I did make the decision so late. So again, I would recommend do it as early as you can, so you have time to do it again. I got a 1490, right? So it's definitely not the most impressive score, and the fact that I didn't do any subject SATs as well, I definitely think that sort of weighed against me in terms of, applications to other schools. So I would recommend taking the SAT as early as you can, doing well, obviously, and taking a good set of subject SATs.
Yeah. So for anything that is STEM quantitative sort of majors that you're trying to apply to, absolutely go ahead and take the subject test. For Indians, the amount of competition there is, you absolutely have to stand out, and one of the only ways to do that is by taking subject SATs, and that is something that I will absolutely recommend anyone, irrespective of what situation you're in. Again, if there are any more questions, please feel free. Otherwise, we are circling towards ending the sort of conversation. So essentially, one last question from a lot of students that we hear. Any general or specific advice that you would have to 9th and 10th graders, and then subsequently we'll get to the 11th graders, but any specific advice that you would have to 9th and 10th graders who are joining us on this call? How should they think about this? What should they be doing?
So I think when you talk to a 9th grader, so looking back to when I was in the 9th grade, I feel like what I should have done is maybe explore a little more, specifically 9th grade, because 9th is academically not that much pressure.
Right.
I mean, neither is 10th, but there is this thing where you have to do well in boards and things like that. So 9th, I feel like take it to explore, and if you feel like this is what interests you, 10th grade is the time to like deep dive.
Right.
Specifically for 11th and 12th graders, I think what I missed out on was, I always look back and I wish I would have done like an internship or something, or reached out to more people and seen if I could work with them. So I feel like reaching out to people and doing that is super important. And complaining about lack of internship infrastructure in India is not the best idea. You can always just build something on the side or do a number of side projects. So that's what I would recommend, to just both demonstrate interest and also just see whether you like the field or not.
Right, absolutely. Again, can't stress enough about having conversations with as many people as possible, because that's the only thing that is going to either give you a particular direction or emphasize that you are on the right path. Both of these things. Or if you're not, then figuring out what other paths exist. There are about 3,000 universities, and each university offers some 100 at least majors or so. And so the major, minor, and university combinations are almost very, very big. It's a huge number. For us to be able to figure out which major, which minor at which university is very difficult unless you open up, you talk about your interests, what have you done so far, unless you take the time off and talk to people like Divyansh, other mentors on the platform, etc. Have those one-on-one conversations. Hey, I like these courses. I want a future in this. What should I be doing from now on? Build specific timelines for yourself, which is also something that we can help you out with. And of course, the next question automatically becomes, how do they build or what should they be doing in their 11th grades?
Yeah, in terms of the 11th grade, I think one way that Indian school students can really set themselves apart is the fact that we still do things like head boy, student council president, and things like that, right? So that is a great opportunity for you to just show people that I can lead a large team, right? And I think that's something that colleges really value, because showing that you have team building skills, the fact that you can work well in a team is super important.
Mm-hmm.
So in the 11th grade, I think hopefully you would have figured out what you want to do. If you haven't, just continue to explore, but try to be a little more focused in your search, and just sort of try to narrow down what you want to do, because 12th grade comes up on you real quick, and before you know it, you have to write boards, you have to do like a bunch of applications. So just be proactive. That's it.
Got it. Cool. So in terms of a couple of questions are popping up in terms of what they should be specifically doing after 10th grade and stuff like that. That's something that we will cover in subsequent sessions. Helpful tips about essays. There's a huge webinar which We will cover every single Common App prompt there is and specific instructions on each and every prompt. So we will cover all of these in the next sections. So I think that's pretty much it in terms of the questions that I had for you. It doesn't look like the students have any more as well. I just wanted to thank you so much in terms of coming onto the call and sharing a lot of really good insights. Divyansh will also be available just in general. We can take your questions at Gradvine, get a few answers from him. So if there are any other questions, feel free to get in touch. Again, the best way to get in touch with us is through the website. Schedule your free consultation call. We will get on call with you specifically about your timelines, all of that stuff. And of course, we will have mentors like Divyansh and many others who will help you out through the application process, be it the timelines, be it the projects that you should be doing, be it the profile building, or be it the application essays themselves. All right. Thank you so much, Divyansh, for coming on the call today. We will hope to hear from you in the future, and all the best for all the career prospects that you have in hand.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So that's pretty much it in terms of the session itself today. Again, if you guys have any more questions, feel free to schedule your free consultations. Best way to get in touch with us is either through emails, info@gradvine.com, or scheduling a free consultation call on the website itself. All of the recordings from the previous webinar and this one will be available. We will post it on our social media and also send you the links to that. Thank you so much for being a patient audience. Our next session will be focused on the timelines and what application materials specifically are required. Again, thank you so much and stay safe.